Marina's hand caught the cold brass railing just as her body began to slip over the edge of the rooftop. 20 stories below, the city lights flickered like trapped stars. Behind her, the woman she'd called sister for 15 years raised a pointed designer boot over her fingers. "Goodbye," Elena whispered, her voice sweet as poison. 3 days earlier. The rain drummed against the kitchen window with the kind of insistent rhythm that made you feel small. Marina sat hunched over a steaming navy blue ceramic mug, her fingers digging into the sides so hard her knuckles had gone white. Her eyes were red-rimmed and moist. On the glass table beside her lay a half-empty box of tissues, a graveyard of used paper, evidence of several hours of sustained crying. "They didn't even give a reason, Elle," Marina said, her voice shaky and devastated. "Just a box for my things and a security escort, like I was a criminal." Elena stood behind her, her manicured hands, sharp red polish like dried blood, placed firmly on Marina's shoulders. She squeezed, a grip that might have been meant to comfort, but felt like possession. Her silver tennis bracelet caught the warm, overhead light, casting small reflections onto the white tile floor. When she leaned down, her cheek almost touching Marina's, there was something in her expression that didn't quite match her words. "It's a blessing, honey," Elena said, her voice smooth and soothing. "You were too good for that place anyway. I'm the only one who truly sees your worth." Marina looked down at the table. That's when she noticed it. Elena's phone lying face up next to her mug. A gold iPhone 14 with a clear case. A notification had just illuminated the screen. An email from HR at Sterling Corp. The preview text was just barely visible before Elena noticed Marina's gaze. The subject line read, Marina's termination. Documentation attached. Elena's entire body tensed. In one fluid motion, she snatched the phone off the table and tucked it into the pocket of her silk robe. Her smile tightened, became thin-lipped and defensive. "Just spam, ignore it," Elena said quickly, already moving away. "Let me get you some more tea." But Marina's mind had already begun its terrible calculations. Why would Elena receive an email about her termination? Why would Sterling Corp be sending documentation to Elena's personal phone? And why had Elena moved so fast to hide it? She didn't ask. Instead, she sat in the warm kitchen and drank the tea Elena brought, and the questions festered like wounds. When Marina finally left Elena's apartment at 11 o'clock, the rain had intensified into the kind of downpour that made the world feel like it was drowning. She walked toward her beat-up blue sedan, her mind still tangled in confusion. The parking lot behind the building was poorly lit, shadowed, the kind of place that made your feet move faster than you intended. That's when the man in the gray hoodie stepped out from behind the dumpster. He was broad-shouldered and moved with the confident menace of someone who'd done this before. In his right hand, he held a short, rusted iron pipe. The metal looked like it had been dragged through hell itself. Marina's heart, already bruised from the day's betrayal, began to race. "Elena said you'd have the settlement money tonight," the man growled. His voice was impatient, the voice of someone used to getting what he wanted. "Hand over the bag." Marina pulled her leather tote bag closer to her chest. She tried to dodge around him, but he moved faster than his bulk suggested possible. His fingers, cold and rough, closed around her upper arm, digging in with the kind of pressure that would leave bruises shaped like accusations. "I don't have any money," Marina screamed. "I just lost my job." But the man didn't seem to believe her. Or perhaps he didn't care. He jerked her toward him, and Marina felt a surge of panic so pure it cut through her confusion like electricity. She swung her heavy tote bag upward, hitting him in the ear with enough force to make him shout. While he was disoriented, pain flickering across his face, she drove her heel into his shin. The crunch she felt reverberating up her leg was deeply satisfying. His grip on her arm loosened. Marina wrenched herself free, her flesh burning where his fingers had been. She sprinted for her car, her keys, the ones with the ridiculous fluffy pink keychain she'd bought on impulse 3 years ago, already in her hand. The car alarm chirped twice as she unlocked the door. She threw herself inside, locked it, and shoved the key into the ignition with shaking hands. The engine turned over. As she peeled out of the parking lot, she watched in the rearview mirror as the man in the gray hoodie stood in the rain, watching her go. Her apartment was dark and cold when she finally arrived home. The first thing Marina did was empty the contents of her leather tote bag onto the floor. Keys scattered, a lipstick tube rolled under the television. And then, sliding out from beneath a folded receipt, a manila envelope marked "Private" in bold black felt-tip marker. Marina didn't remember putting it there. Her hands trembled as she ripped the envelope open. Inside was a contract. Not just any contract, but an agreement between Sterling Corp and someone named Elena Varga for something described as a consultancy fee. The number at the bottom of the page was $20,000. The description, printed in clinical corporate language, read, "For services rendered in the termination and character assessment of Marina Lane." Marina read it 3 times, thinking that maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. The meaning was impossible and perfectly clear. Elena had sold her out, not in the way that friends sometimes betray each other through thoughtlessness or circumstance. This was calculated. This was documented. This was a transaction. She sat on her kitchen floor for an hour, just staring at the contract. Her entire body felt hollow, as though someone had reached inside her and removed everything essential, leaving only the outer shell. By the next morning, Marina had made a decision. She was going to Sterling Corp. She was going to walk into that building and demand an explanation. She was going to make them tell her exactly what Elena had done to her. And she was going to make sure there were witnesses. She put on a sharp black blazer over a white shirt. She did her makeup with careful precision. If her hands shook as she applied the eyeliner, she told herself it was just the caffeine. She didn't bother much with her hair. It was messy, still damp, but there was an angry defiance in leaving it that way. Let them see her like this. Let them see what they'd broken. The Sterling Corp offices occupied the top 12 floors of a gleaming skyscraper downtown. The lobby was all glass and light and aggressively modern marble. Marina marched to the sleek white reception desk, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. Every surface reflected her back to herself, angry, determined, alone. "I need to see Mr. Sterling," Marina said to the receptionist. "Now." The receptionist, who looked about 19 and had the vague, pleasant expression of someone trained to deal with difficult people, hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" That's when the elevator chimed. Elena stepped out first, her arm linked through Mr. Sterling's, an older man with silver hair and a gold watch that probably cost more than Marina's car. Elena was wearing a designer ivory suit that made her look like an angel or a ghost. Marina couldn't decide which. When Elena's eyes found her across the lobby, something flickered across her face. Concern, maybe. Or performance. Elena leaned closer to Mr. Sterling, whispering something in his ear. His expression shifted. Then they turned toward Marina, and Elena's face arranged itself into an expression of practiced pity. "Marina, dear," Elena said. her voice dropping to the kind of softness that implied Marina was fragile, breakable. "We discussed this. You need help, not a scene. Don't make this harder on yourself." She spoke as though this were a continuation of a conversation that had never happened, as though they'd agreed on something, as though Marina was sick, unreasonable, dangerous. Mr. Sterling's hand moved to Elena's waist. In that gesture, Marina saw everything. She saw the decision that had already been made. She saw that Elena had not just taken her job, she'd taken her reputation. She'd gone ahead of Marina into this building and painted her as unfit, unstable, maybe dangerous. She'd wrapped it all in the language of concern. And Mr. Sterling had believed her because why wouldn't he? Elena was credible. Elena was his advisor. Elena was the woman who smiled at him with such genuine care. Marina opened her mouth to speak, but Elena was already guiding Mr. Sterling back toward the elevator. She didn't look at Marina again. She didn't need to. Marina left the building through the same glass doors she'd entered. She walked to the parking garage on automatic pilot, her mind spinning through scenarios and explanations, each one worse than the last. She was halfway to her car when they emerged from behind the concrete pillar, two men in black suits and dark sunglasses, the kind of men who existed in corporate spaces to handle problems that couldn't be solved with memos. The first one blocked her car door. The second one approached from her left. "Miss Vargas says you have something that belongs to her," the first man said. His voice was empty of all inflection, robotic in its menace. "The envelope, please." Marina's hand went to her blazer pocket where she'd placed the manila envelope that morning. She'd meant to leave it somewhere safe, somewhere Elena couldn't find it. She'd been too slow. The first man reached for her pocket. Without thinking, or perhaps thinking with the clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose, Marina bit his hand. She bit down hard, harder than she thought her jaw could bite. She tasted blood, real and hot and copper bright. The man screamed. He shoved her back against a parked SUV, and her head connected with a glass window with a dull, resonant thud. Stars bloomed at the edges of her vision. The second man grabbed her waist. Marina let him pull her forward, used the momentum to drive her heel down onto his instep with all her weight. The crunch of bone was satisfying. She dropped to the floor, crawled between two parked cars, and disappeared into the dark corner of the garage toward the stairs. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she climbed. Behind her, she could hear them shouting, searching. But she was already at the ground level, already pushing through the exit door into the afternoon sunlight. She walked away from the building without looking back, her torn blazer sleeve hanging loose, her heart a frantic bird in her chest. She didn't go home. Home was eviction. Home was where they would find her. Instead, she went to the internet cafe on 5th Street, the kind of place where nobody asked questions, and the computers were old enough to be reasonably untraceable. The sticky wooden desk, the dim light, the hum of ancient cooling fans. Marina plugged in the red thumb drive she'd found inside the manila envelope. A folder titled Observation, M. Lane, materialized on the screen. Her fingers felt numb as she clicked through the files. There were photographs. There were dates going back 5 years. 5 years of documentation. There were transcripts of conversations Marina had never known were being recorded. There were financial transfers and hotel bills and photographs of her with people she'd been with in private moments. She opened a photo file, and there was herself, 3 years younger, standing next to a man named Mark. Mark, whom she'd loved. Mark, whom she'd planned to marry until everything had fallen apart in a single week of jealousy and accusations and screaming fights. Attached to the photo was a text transcript. Elena to Mark. Elena telling Mark that Marina was cheating on him. Elena providing details, names, times. Lies so specific they sounded like truth. Marina read through the rest of the files like someone in a fever dream. She saw her entire life, laid out in careful documentation. Every failure, every loss, every relationship that had crumbled, every job that had slipped through her fingers. Every time she'd wondered if something was wrong with her, if she was somehow fundamentally broken. Elena had broken her, deliberately, systematically, for reasons that Marina was only now beginning to piece together. Everything, Marina whispered to the humming computer. She destroyed every single thing I had. She packed the thumb drive into her pocket and left the cafe. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky the color of old bruises. Marina drove back to her apartment building. It was a small place, a studio in a building full of people who kept to themselves, people who minded their own business. She'd thought of it as a sanctuary. The lock on her door was new, shining brass, expensive looking. It had replaced the old lock she'd had for 3 years. When she tried her key, it wouldn't even slide into the slot. Taped to the door was a notice printed on bright orange paper, an eviction notice. It cited illegal activity and was signed by the property manager. Below the official text, someone had written in blue ink, "Elena called us. We know about the police." Marina slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor of the hallway. A neighbor walked past, pretending not to see her. Then another. Then nobody for a long time. "She's taking my home," Marina said to the empty hallway. "She's actually taking my home." She didn't sleep that night. She didn't sleep the next night either. She moved through the world like a ghost, spending her days in the public library, spending her nights in her car or in diners that stayed open all night. She watched her bank account dwindle. She watched Elena's name appear in the society pages of local news websites, photographed at charity events, photographed with Mr. Sterling, photographed as though she were a respectable person. And slowly, as the days accumulated into something like a week, a plan began to form. It started small. Marina began to notice patterns in Elena's schedule. She was at Sterling Corp on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She had coffee at the same cafe on Wednesday at 2 p.m. She went to the gym on Saturday mornings. And every evening around 7, she went up to the rooftop of Sterling Corp. Sometimes she took calls up there. Sometimes she just stood looking out at the city, as though the view belonged to her. The rooftop, the edge, the place where nobody else went. Marina had worked at Sterling Corp for 4 years. She knew the building like she knew her own apartment. She knew that the rooftop access was theoretically restricted, but that the card reader for the roof-level door had been broken for months. A maintenance issue that nobody seemed interested in fixing. She knew that there were blind spots in the security camera coverage. She knew that if she climbed the maintenance stairs and timed it right, she could make it up there without being seen. She crafted a message on a burner phone and sent it to Elena's number. "I'm going to the police tomorrow morning with everything. Meet me on the roof at midnight if you want to talk first." Then she took her old silver digital recorder, the one she'd used for years when she was an investigator, back when she had a job worth doing, and she checked that the battery was full. She clipped it inside her blazer, pressed record, and made her way to Sterling Corp. The building at night was a different place. The lobby was empty except for a security guard who didn't look up from his desk. Marina walked past him without hesitation, as though she belonged there. She took the maintenance stairs. 12 flights up. Her legs burned. Her breath came hard. But she didn't stop. The rooftop was exactly as she remembered. Gravel covering the tar, safety railings around the perimeter, the wind picking up, carrying the scent of the city, exhaust and rain, and the ghost of 1,000 restaurants. The city lights spread out below like a map of all the places she'd loved and lost. Elena arrived at midnight and 3 minutes. She walked out onto the gravel, and the wind caught her dark hair, pulling it back from her face. She was wearing an expensive black coat. Her face was calm, almost serene. She held a taser in her right hand, partially hidden by her coat. "You should have just taken the hint and moved away, Marina," Elena said. Her voice was tired. "Why do you make me hurt you?" Marina didn't respond. She lunged. They collided with the force of 2 bodies, finally reaching the point where words became irrelevant. They fell onto the gravel together, Elena landing hard on her back, with Marina on top of her. Elena tried to press the taser against Marina's neck, but Marina grabbed her wrists, straining to keep the prongs away from her skin. She could feel the electricity crackling between them, the blue sparks illuminating Elena's face. Her fingers felt numb. Her arms were shaking. Elena was stronger than she looked. Or maybe she was filled with a particular kind of fury that made her stronger. She twisted, throwing her weight to the side. Marina lost her grip. Elena broke free and kicked out, her boot connecting with Marina's ribs. The air burst out of Marina's lungs. She slid across the gravel toward the edge. Her hand caught the bottom railing just as her body began to slip over the edge. Her legs dangled into the air. 20 stories below, the street was a river of light and distance. Elena stood over her, breathing hard. Her clothes were covered in gray gravel dust and specks of blood. "You were always the good one," Elena said, leaning down until her face was inches from the railing. "Everyone loved Marina, even my own father. When he died, he left his estate to you, his chosen daughter." Marina's eyes went wide. She remembered the old man now, Mr. Varga. She'd volunteered at the hospice, and there had been an old man in room 312 who had no visitors, who sat by the window day after day, staring out at nothing. Marina had sat with him. She'd held his hand. She'd read him stories. She'd called him father, not because he was her father, but because he was alone, and the words seemed to comfort him. She'd never known he was Elena's father. He was your father?" Marina said, her voice small and disbelieving. "Yes," Elena said. "And he gave you everything. He gave you his money. He gave you his love." Her fingers were numb and bleeding where the metal had cut into them. Elena lay gasping on the gravel, stunned. Marina stood over her and placed a knee on her chest. Then, very carefully, she pulled the silver digital recorder out of her blazer pocket and held it up where Elena could see it. The red recording light was blinking steadily. "I may have been good, Elena," Marina said, her voice perfectly calm. "But I was also the best investigator Sterling ever had." The police arrived at Sterling Corp 3 hours later. Marina had called them herself, still on the rooftop, still holding the recorder. She explained what had happened. She played back portions of the recording for them. The officers listened to Elena's confession, to the inheritance, to the sabotage, to the years of calculated destruction, all of it captured in crystalline digital quality. Elena was taken away in handcuffs. Her ivory suit was covered in gray dust and blood. As they led her past Marina, she didn't fight. She didn't scream. She simply looked, and in that look was a year's worth of hatred, perfectly preserved and perfectly pointless. A month later, Marina stood in the garden of a large Victorian mansion. The grass was lush and green. The sun was warm on her face. In her hand, she held a heavy brass key. The real one. The one that had belonged to Mr. Varga. the one he'd left her. She walked toward the large oak tree in the center of the garden. Its branches were thick and ancient, and they spread out like a benediction. At the base of the tree, there was a small metal plaque. Marina knelt down and read the inscription. "To Marina," it read, "who gave me a daughter's love when my own blood gave me only silence." Marina's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from the words. She stayed there, kneeling in the grass, for a long time. When she finally stood, she turned and walked toward the house. The Victorian mansion rose before her, all white walls and tall windows and possibility. She climbed the porch steps. As she reached for the heavy oak door, her phone began to ring. The screen lit up. The caller ID read Mark. She looked at the phone for a moment. Then she took it and dropped it into the trash bin beside the porch. She watched it disappear into the darkness of the bin. She wiped her hands on her legs. Then she opened the heavy oak door and walked inside. The door closed behind her with a solid thud.